Today I'm going to show you how I made this pop-up Omnitrix from Ben 10 Race Against Time. There is no painting required and no sanding. You'll literally go from 0 to hero in less than a day. Stick around if you want to find out how. So I'm going to be using this amazing digital 3D model created by KA Cosplay Tech, which is available on Wireframe. The link to purchase these files is linked down below if you guys would like to follow along with me. Oh, already? Oh. This model is honestly amazing. It's the first Omnitrix I've ever made that actually has the ability for the core to pop up. The kit comes with an instruction manual and materials list too, which I'll be going over shortly. But this prop is also designed with a button that allows you to put it on and take it off with such ease. Now, in order for you to make this yourself, you're going to need to go and grab the kit. When you first download the files, you'll see all of the 3D model parts organized into 2 separate folders, as well as an instruction manual. It also comes with an extra 3MF file, which is basically a preset. So you can drag and drop this file into your slicer, and it will have all of the files already neatly organized and orientated on your build plate, plus they'll be painted. Wow. So all you have to do is hit slice and print. Now I am going to be using Bambu Lab printers, but I'm going to show you guys how to do it manually. By the way, you can use any 3D printer. I just heavily prefer the Bambu Lab printers. Not just because they can print in color, but because of how smooth the prints come out. Compare this 5YL Omnitrix model prototype that I printed on my Ender 3 S1 with this Race Against Time Omnitrix that I printed on my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. You can clearly see the layer lines in this print. You would have to sand those out and prime this model before you could even think about painting it. Otherwise those layer lines would be terribly visible, it would look awful. Whereas this print looks like it was already primed, sanded, and painted. But this came straight out of the printer, already printed in color. The files will be split into 2 different folders. The ones that do require supports while printing, and the ones that don't require supports when printing. But these files are oriented in such a way that when I drag and drop them into my slicer, the majority of the time, all I have to do is to tell the slicer to automatically add tree supports. And 9 out of 10 times they come out perfect. Pause. Some of you might be asking yourself, what the hell is a slicer? Don't worry, I got you covered. A slicer refers to a program like Orca Slicer or Cura, which takes your 3D model and slices it up into tiny little layer lines called G-code, which are basically little instructions that you can then send to your printer so it can rebuild your model 1 layer at a time until you have your 3D model in real life. Back to adding supports. For these larger files like the base, I did manually paint some supports around the edges just to make sure it was extra sturdy. Do this especially if you're going to be using a bed slinger printer like the A1. It's not so much of a worry for the more Core XY printers that are stable and the extruder just moves around the build plate. Painting the model is really straightforward too. Once you have all of your filaments in your AMS system, they should appear here. Now we can just select the color we want and use the really handy fill tool, which is really smart at detecting edges, so we can just fill in the parts that we want to color. And then we send it off to the printer. Now that you got all of your files printed, let's go through the manual and see what extra parts we need to order and how to put everything together. We're going to need to order a bunch of different screws, heat inserts, and springs. But the manual comes with a link to all of these parts, so don't stress, it's easy. Once they arrive, we can start assembling the Omnitrix. The first thing we need to do is install the heat inserts into the face plate. These are here so we later can screw the dial lock into place. Now the way you do this is by taking a hot soldering iron and pressing the heat inserts into the holes until they melt into place. But be careful not to press too hard because you can easily warp the plastic. The next step is to align the dial lock and sandwich it with the faceplate in between the dial. You can then screw the M2x6 screws into place. Next we take the lid piece and insert the core into it. Then take the button and slide it into place along the grooves. Then insert this spring piece into place. Next, take the latch and press it against the spring to lock it into place against the button. Now you can press the core into the latch so it catches. Now we align the tubes with their corresponding grooves and screw them into place with our M2x10 screws. We can now take the entire dial assembly and lock it into place using the provided key we printed by twisting clockwise until it locks into place. Now take the base piece and add the necessary springs. It was a bit tricky getting them in there, so I used a small screwdriver to press down on the bottom of the spring until it fit properly. Now take the top stack and align it with the springs. Push down and sandwich it together. Keep the pressure and use your other hand to screw it into place with the M2x8 screws. Now you can test your pop-up function. If for some reason it doesn't work, take it all apart and make sure everything lines up properly. Okay, we're almost done. Install the latch plate with the M2x6 screws. Now add the rest of the M2x6 screws that secure the tubes. Now you can install the latch release by sandwiching a spring in between it and the cover. Screw it down with the M2x6 screws. Add the remaining tubes and screw them down with the M2x6 screws. Now for the final step, which is installing the hinges. You can take a regular piece of 3D printing filament, snip it to size, and it can act as a hinge for the prop. This can be a little frustrating to get it to fit, but just be patient. Line the two pieces up and do your best to work the filament into the slots. Once it's aligned correctly, snip off the excess and do the same for the other side. Now your Omnitrix should be complete. Snap it onto your wrist and turn into some aliens.